Okay, so welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kieran. I kind of feel like I have missed this. I've missed connecting with guests. I've missed having real conversations. I've missed feeling the energy of sharing stories. So I appreciate everyone that has messaged saying, hey, where'd you go? How come there's no more episodes? Thank you for noticing that. That feels great. I heard you. I'm back. This is the first episode after my summer break. So I just thought I'd share with you guys because, I'm always upfront and honest. At the beginning of the summer, I'm going to be honest, like my heart just felt like it needed a little tending. I did not want to force recordings. I kind of had to meet myself honestly where I was at. And that was a little nerve-wracking because you have this complex where you think, oh, you're in a momentum, for almost 3 years. There's an episode every week. You have people that are responding, listening, giving feedback. Will you get forgotten? People are going to say something, that whole thing that goes through our mind. But ultimately, the battle of what people think and where I'm at, I beat that battle because maybe it's like, if you are going to have these conversations, you also have to walk the walk too. And for me, I just felt like I needed a little bit of a step back, a slower pace, reflecting to some of the things going on in my own household, tending to my family, and noticing some transitions that I'm sort of experiencing right now. And so I didn't want to override all that and pretend, yay, everything's great, when I knew I needed to sort of manage my own stuff. So isn't that kind of what all this is about anyway? Putting our middle fingers up to stupid expectations and pressures while figuring out what tools, we all need to both add to our toolbox, or in this case, our Tiffin, or even take out. I think over the years, we inherit strategies, we learn them, we compensate, we put them in our Tiffin, and then we get to this place where we have to go in there and realize, okay, maybe these strategies aren't serving me. And sometimes these strategies are not really good coping strategies either, but we put them in here and they've helped us. So this whole sort of summer was just doing some, I think, cleaning out of my toolkit and coming to terms of where I'm really at when I'm navigating life's ups and downs. So I'm all good. I'm super excited to be back. I'm with a guest who is part of the MFU family. I'd like to say that. Her name is Shuraya. And the funny thing about this is that you're meeting her for the first time today. We're sort of doing this backwards because she has her story, her beautiful episode coming out in a couple weeks. But we decided to come back and record this one together, and I'll get into why in a second. But I'll give you a little context about who this lovely human is. She is a Bengali home cook. She's a mother, she's a sister, she's a wife, she's a daughter, she's an immigrant. My favorite part of her, though, is that she is a beautiful storyteller. Her kitchen is more than a place for food. It's about culture, it's about connection, it's about healing. I really hope you come back in a couple weeks and listen to her story. A lot of creative energy came out of a grief process she went to, and that sort of helped her open her kitchen. But I don't want to get into that today. I will save this. She's joining us today to explore transitions back to school, back to life for some of us after summer vacation. And I think it's important to sort of pause and acknowledge how transitions show up for us. And they show up in parenting. They show up in a lot of homes with ADHD. They show up in our marriages. They show up in self-care. The list goes on and on and on. So all of this is going to be through the lens of what's in our Tiffin. Shuraya, welcome back. So today we're going to unpack our Tiffin. We're going to talk about the big and small transitions. And maybe for those who don't know what a Tiffin is, Shuraya, do you want to let people know what it is?
Like the Tiffin? Hi, everybody.
Yeah, welcome. Just throw it out at you.
Hi, everyone. Again, Kian, thank you so much for having me as a guest. It's always a privilege that I get a chance to speak to you about important things. And you talked about Tiffin, and all I can think about is lunch.
It's like a
It
stacked
literally
lunchbox.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just unpacking, right?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Like it's just unpacking. The kids are bringing something with them, all the stuff that they've been absorbing from home, because we all know that's how kids' mental health really starts from the ground go like at home.
Yeah.
And then you go to school, you go to the real world with the tiffin, I guess, in the lunchtime. Like, I mean, that's a very nice way to put it. Yeah.
So it comes from our background comes from South Asia, right? There's, like you said, it's a
Mm-hmm.
stacked
Mm-hmm.
lunch box. So many
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
take it with rice, sabji, dals, whatever, curry, whatever you
Yeah.
want to put in
Yeah.
it. But today, like you said, exactly, you said it so well. Each layer is a section of that we want to sort of work through. It's like literally food for thought. We send our kids with lunch, but we also need to dig a little bit deeper, challenge ourselves as parents, and what else are we sending them with outside of their lunch?
Mm-hmm.
Values, expectations, identity, all these kinds of things. So that is exactly right. That's what we're talking about today. And if we can, before we start, I just want to sort of bridge what inspired today's conversation, because this kind of just came up. We didn't have plans of you coming back so soon for today's talk. But what happened is over the summer, I had the privilege of co-hosting a grief and recovery, an intimate workshop for South Asian women, where we just unravel what is grief, how it shows up in our life, and so on and so on. And something that was sitting with me after you said it sort of inspired this conversation. And what you had said when we asked, how does grief show up for you? You talked about how as a parent, when you are helping your kids make memories, providing safety, parenting, all the things you're supposed to do, you also are grieving that you don't have many childhood memories of your own lived experiences. And that's because of trauma that you experienced. And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes for people our age and in our community, it's exhausting because we're like breaking barriers. So
Mm-hmm.
something that maybe we didn't get or we could have got different, we're also learning how to give for the first time to our children. And so we're learning all these things while our kids are experiencing them. And I loved how you were able to acknowledge and pause and give light to the fact like that's also grief. And it's showing up. And if we don't tend to it, it'll continue to then show up in how you parent your children, whether you like the way you're parenting them or not. It really stayed with me the way you spoke of it. And I was really, really grateful the next day when I messaged you less than 24 hours later, was like, hey, I have an idea. And you were like, let's do it. So that is sort of how we started. And if I could just also talk a little bit really quickly before we get into the first layer of our Tiffin. Trauma is going to come up a lot, and I just want to share a little bit about it. Most of us, I think it's safe to say all of us in this world experience some form of trauma in our lives. The difference in what Shuraya was saying in the grief and loss workshop, and that will probably come up today, is we experience trauma, and let's say as a child, we experience it. What happens immediately after to help us heal and process is significant. And so many of us, and I think a lot of us in our South Asian community, we carry very rich intergenerational trauma histories. And then this trauma can pass down not only through the family's experiences, but even through our bodies. So via epigenetics. So basically, our stress responses and our nervous systems can carry echoes of what previous generations endured. So if my mom is experiencing traumatic, whatever experiences while she's pregnant with me, those vibes are going to be passed down to me. But so are the ones that she experienced through her childhood, and so on and so on. And people think this is some kind of conspiracy theory, and it's hard to see. It's like germs. When we first learned of them, we couldn't see them, so we didn't believe in them. It's very similar with trauma, but this is true. This is what happens, and there's just research coming out. The more we talk about it, I think the better we will be to provide more research. So, of course, we each also experience, like I said earlier, our own versions of trauma outside of what's passed down to us. So if the people that are to provide safety for us, whether it's us as children or when we're vulnerable as adults, cannot get it together, cannot come together, provide a safe environment, help us heal, then this sort of trauma will come out through negative impacts and will linger into adulthood. And where we really see it is when we are in our relationships long term, when we're married, and definitely when we're parenting our kids. So because if it affects our self-regulation, affects our relationships, and like I said, our parenting. So that's kind of why we're here today, because that's this whole conversation that Shuraya sort of led in this grief workshop inspired us coming here and sharing our knowledge and experiences with you folks, because I think a lot of you out there are in the same boat of learning about it, curious about it, and maybe even denying it. There's so many different ways that we're looking at it. And so we just invite you today to show up with some curiosity, because we are trying to build a community that's thriving, right? Not just surviving, as we say. So super, super grateful you're here. Anything that you want to add to what I said before we get into our first layer of our stacked Tiffin?
Thank you. I think you explained it quite beautifully. It is important that, again, parenting, like my mother-in-law says sometimes that, oh, like, we didn't have to talk this much to our kids back in our time. And I was like, yeah, I understand. But parenting concept has only been like around short time. Parenting, we all know about motherhood, and motherhood was glamorized and looked more upon like God, even. Like sometimes, like we even have a saying in our religious scriptures too, that how you have heaven underneath your mother's feet. So you have to respect her and all that. So there's so much mother has been on the pedestal, like so high, that we have let a lot of unregulated mothers carry on with their unregulated emotions and triggers and trauma, and continued having kids, and also, like you said, passing down to the next child, to the after. And I think one thing to really identify is change bring change, right? Like you said, even when I'm carrying my first child, if my husband was stressed, that will cause me stress, which will come to my baby. So this just simply how it is. We're all as a team. And if I am working on all that tough work, which is the inner child work, which you're supposed to do that before you have kids.
Yeah, that's ideal.
But again, ideal, right? But obviously our generation is parenting not just ourselves, but like our parents and our kids, and unlearning a lot of the things that we also carried among ourselves.
Yeah.
Naturally, like subconsciously. So I think when I have done my child inner work, I've instantly have seen my husband do his share of work. So it's all together. And now we're both co-parenting the same child. He doesn't feel like a stepdad anymore. And I don't feel like someone who has a completely different parenting style. We're all as a team, we're all in the same page. And we're hoping that the next future generation can, carry this skill and pass it down to their kids.
That's exactly it. We're breaking barriers, and I think we're not throwing shade to our parents, our caregivers, previous generations. Like, we know what we know, right? And I think in many ways what you're speaking to is we're trying to break or this whole cultural stigma of, okay, well, we're fine. And we do hear that a lot. We hear, we turned out fine, so why aren't the kids fine now? And I think we have to remind ourselves, if we can't remind those elders or those folks that have that mentality, is that often fine meant suppressing, ignoring, or masking struggles. And so today we're choosing to do better by naming the challenges and, offering tools. So it's sure one way of looking at it, but ultimately, any of us that had to say, I turned out fine, often there's a deeper story attached to poor coping strategies. So we have a lot of physical health issues, addictions, sexualized trauma, all sorts of things added in there that
Mhm.
that add to that. Well, I turned out fine. So we're not trying to one better than the other. Like you said, we're just
Mhm.
trying to give strategies so the next generation can build off of that. And that's why we're here. I organized the layers of the Tiffin. So those of you that know me well, you might think, oh gosh, you don't know how to organize. So it might be all over the place, but I think I did it. So when I think of, okay, as we want people here today to leave with tangible things that they can put in their Tiffin, they can pack or unpack with. And these are just our ideas. Add yours, send us feedback, all of that. We're building a community, so we need everyone's voice. It's not just harping on the two wonderful ladies of today's episode. I think I'd like to start with parenting and transitions. And I think we can also throw in the ADHD lens. You're one that's diagnosed with ADHD. You spoke about it in the episode that's coming out in a few weeks, and I know you're going to speak to it today. And I also had a summer of my youngest son being diagnosed by a psychologist with ADHD. So I am a parent to someone in the home that has ADHD. So I think there's lots of things that I'm learning, that you're experiencing, that we could probably come from an ADHD lens when we talk about parenting and transition. So maybe, and when we say transition, it's just a reminder, we're talking about a change from one state, an environment, a routine to another. So where we are now, with summer is ending, school's starting, so we're going to have different structure. So anything in terms of from an ADHD lens or just in general when we talk about transitions that you want to add here?
First of all, I want to add, because sometimes I feel like, parents with ADHD, I do think like they would have to strategize a different parenting approach. Of course, there is a gentle parenting, but at the same time, keeping yourself regulated at the same time and communication up. Like, I think communication, that's the golden word that needs to be implemented every single day as your child is living with you and communicating with you. Just tune in all the emotions. And sometimes I feel like ADHD, like a lot of, I feel like the boomers label it as a bad parenting thing, like bad parenting, or like a parent who don't know themselves.
Yeah.
They're just figuring things out, and that is really it. Again, like you said, it is something new, and there's still needs to be a lot of research done with kids ADHD, and let alone parents. But at the same time, yes, while learning this whole strategy, at the same time, give yourself some grace, work on your more connection with your kids. It is tough, especially when I'm the one with the, diagnosed with ADHD, and my son also got diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 7. And we quickly caught that my husband also has a little bit of that as well. So now we're kind of making the connections and kind of seeing it eye to eye. It's not about correction or like criticism. It's really the connection. You want to see it from their lens, and to do that, it's communication. I teach a lot about emotions to my son. So even like for example, like anger. Anger has a lot of branches as well. So anger would have irritation. Anger would have harsh words. Anger would have annoyance. Anger would have violated feeling. So anger has a lot of branches, and I have this huge graph in my in my bedroom. And when they two are fighting, now I make them call out the emotions instead of name calling.
Yeah.
Call out label the emotions. It is not it's recognize it. So you feel like really screaming, you can step back and go to your room, scream to your pillow, regulate yourself. When you're ready, label the emotions. Let's figure this out together. No one is criticizing you. We're all as a team. I'm learning, you're learning, and we do therapy together.
Yeah.
So he's been seeing his mom willing to understand him, not more about criticizing and correcting him all the time.
Right.
But it's all about getting into the habits of calling out the emotions and recognizing it, taking that few pauses, like you said, and then regulate yourself and then kind of speak your words. And I have so many examples I hope to share so other parents can, benefit from that.
Yeah. So I love what you're sharing, and we're going to break that down a bit. So part of what I'm hearing you talk about is you mentioned emotional regulation. And so the impact when we miss transitions throughout the day or aren't maybe observing the cues that our kids are giving us, there's two things to think about. One is our nervous system stays activated when we don't get transition. So we're not pausing. Like I said, so you go on vacation and you keep working. I was someone that always did that. I never had a moment to stop, take a break. I never allowed myself to. So my nervous system is still very highly activated, I'm learning. And my emotional regulation then is strained. When your nervous system is operating off of high stress, then this is kind of what happens. Your nervous system, and this happens in both children and adults, you're in this heightened state of alert. And so it shows up restlessness, like you said, irritability, feeling on edge, but there's really nothing to make you feel like you're on edge. You're just there. You're just there. And sometimes we see this with our kids. We're like, my God, just wants to fight with me all day. Or even our partners. We're like, man, like, why are you just looking for a fight? Well, you're not looking for a fight, but this is what your nervous system is telling you that something's going on. So physiologically, your heart rate, stress hormones, like the cortisol can stay elevated, and it makes it harder to come down and regulate. And then when you think about emotional regulation and how that is strained with this activated nervous system so high up, your ability to manage your emotions becomes harder. So little tiny frustrations in the day are bigger. Patience runs thinner. So our children may act out, they may shut down, they may become clingy, and then adults may snap or feel overwhelmed. And these are just some examples. I mean, I think we all know how we are when we're operating, but sometimes, like you said, we got to put a label to it. We got to understand where this is coming from. And I really liked what you said. So everything's communication, and that's exactly what behavior is. Behavior is a symptom. It's not a problem. So when I used to work in crisis, we used to talk about the iceberg. So when you see an iceberg in water, you just see the little tip of it. And that's our behavior. But when you look below the water, the iceberg is in fact quite huge. There's a lot going on underneath. And I think sometimes in how we've been raised or a community, we're very quick, like you said, don't correct. We're not correcting a behavior, but we are very quick to want to stop the behavior. Like just stop. You have a kid that, especially boys fall, hurt themselves. Just get it together. You're okay. Be a boy. You got this. And it's like, if I got stung by a wasp, I'm a grown-ass woman. I would not just be carrying on through the day. Like, I'm going to need 10 minutes to cry right now. So why do we expect children to just pick themselves and get on with it? So my question for you is, when you think of your Tiffin growing up, what did it hold? It's a two-part question. And now as a parent, what do you want to pack differently for your kids?
Like you said, like the previous generation was really great at pushing things under the rug. Actually, from my story, and when I host cooking classes in my home, even to my guests, I always share this story, how for my parents, it was putting feast over the table. It was never pushing it under the rug. It was always over the table. So if we had some issues or some outbursts or some huge fight or arguments, the next day my mom would be cooking that person's, like the person who reacted the most negatively. She will cook their favorite food and present it and expect like nothing happened. And you can be so confused as a child. And there's no accountability, there's no connections, there's no communications, let alone, and communications, why it's so hard, because I really, really do feel like, for example, my mom, and again, it's only because she learned it through her mom, and her mom learned it through her grandma. And my mom kind of communicated only during anger. Like, I have heard that woman use words the fastest speed when she's angry, when she's raging for hours. And that is an unregulated, undiagnosed mother who's been through a lot of trauma herself.
Yeah.
And but before, when I used to get these, and even growing up, even before I became a mother, I held a lot of resentment. I held a lot of confusion and anger and resentment. I was always like bitter towards
Mm-hmm.
my mom and never saw her eye to eye because, again, I was a child. I didn't really see my home as a safe place.
Yeah.
And that's something I just made a quote the other day because, and I shared it to my family. Hospitals feel more safe to me than my home.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, as an adult, when I enter a hospital, I feel safe. And it's only because when I have visited hospitals, I have received unconditional love and care, and there was no expectations of how to behave, how to react. You could be yourself, you could say what your symptoms are and not be judged by it.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, why it's important to recognize this in your kids and as they're figuring themselves out, so they can carry that and face the real world, because holy cow, it's so difficult. And I feel like me coming to school, for example, with my lunch, I felt very safe. I felt very safe. And that is only because of the trauma. My innocence, my playfulness, my sense of safety was cut short, very, very short when I was a child because of abuse, sexual abuse, and, neglect, and lots of, trauma dumping. And like, yeah, it has a lot of effect that even affects you as an adult, as a mother, as a wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a child, when they're opening their tiffin, they they should just open their tiffin and smell and really come in terms with their senses,
Mm.
not really be fight and fight mode, right?
Yep.
You're not gonna worry, oh, if I don't finish it, then my mom's gonna be angry when I go home.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I did not want to have the hot dog, but I forced myself to eat it because I didn't want to make my mom more angry.
Yeah.
And so everything, a child will internalize everything you say. If you say you are a bad child, that's it. He will feel like a bad person. It's never about what they did. They will internalize it so much that, as simple as having a lunch in a nicely packed food that you did in the morning, your child is not seeing it that way anymore. You have lost the connection.
Yeah.
So make sure, and I feel like that's why it's so important when your child is leaving your home and going into the real world and opening up your lunch that you prepared in the morning, make sure that they are connected to their food, what they put into their system and what they come out, what they let out, and how they deal with.
I hear it was grand gestures, but not the little
Mm,
things of taking responsibility, accountability, no change. And I think
mm,
for you, years later, you grow up and you learn you have ADHD. So as a child, when you don't know that, the most important thing for any child, let alone a child with ADHD, is a predictable environment. And so having
mm-hmm.
consistency, not when again, your nervous system is so at high level because
Yeah,
you're,
yeah,
is mom going to be mad today? Is so and so going to be upset? What's going to be in the lunch?
yeah.
When you're worrying about all those things, I bet if I asked you, do you remember what you learned in elementary school, high school? My guess is your answer is going to be no. Like you probably weren't able to contain and process all of that
No,
information because you're on survival mode.
you're on a survival mode. And honestly, this is why we started this, episode, right? Because we talked about my grief. And at this stage of life, I am grieving literally the loss of childhood and sending my daughter to preschool 3 times a week. And just, and as she's 4 and she has a long way to go, but as she's growing and developing and showing her bright personality, I am grieving my childhood.
Yeah.
And it is not something that I can still talk about to my kids because, again, she gets triggered. She's still undiagnosed. She's not healed. And it is something that I have accepted. It's how she is. And I just have to protect myself and create this safe space for my child. But holy, it is so sad that when you think back, you have no memory to really hold back to or share and sit with, because, yeah, like you said, it was in a survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And being in an unpredictable household,
Yeah.
I had no idea when the next fight will break.
Yeah.
I was the oldest daughter, so you can imagine I was parentified daughter from a
Yeah.
very young age. I was the caretaker, and I remember even when like my biggest trauma is, I will say that when my mom and dad left me, and we were in Saudi at that time, when they left for their immigration process to Syria for their visa and everything for their PR. And they left me with my two uncles and my five siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And I was only 11. So 11 and having all of these responsibilities. And unfortunately, on top of that, abuse happened. And that really, really scars you for forever. I
Yeah.
think it is a scar that you have to wear. It's just how you now deal and how you manage your current PTSD, your triggers and your trauma, and kind of regulate yourself, whether it's with pills or self-regulation or a walk or breathing techniques, whatever it is. Um, that's how much impact it has.
And the bottom line is like, well, first of all, I really appreciate how open you are being, sharing your childhood experience. This is very meaningful, and I want to thank you for that. So let me know if you need a break or a transition or move to something else, because I only want you to talk about what you feel comfortable talking about. But I will say to you, when you share this, I think you connect to so many people in our community, present party included, with some similar experiences or connections about childhood. And I think the hard part, I would imagine, is you have this sort of history of your childhood, and then you have to manage it on your own, and then you go and have children, and you really have to manage it. Like, you don't get any kind of get out of jail free card as they give us in Monopoly with, oh, it's okay, you experienced trauma, you don't have to do that. Like, you have no other way but to face your past in order to raise the future. And what's like, how do you manage all that? Because that's a huge responsibility if you're in the era of breaking barriers and putting in new coping mechanisms, healthy ones. Like, you don't have a manual. No one before you's done this. So you're legit learning it, testing it, and dealing with your childhood while raising your kids in the safest environment. So what helps you sleep at night when you're working through all of these experiences?
Oh, for sure. My sleep is excellent, as per my Garmin. right.
Well, that is lovely. You're doing some really good work.
Because my husband's like, my sleep quality is not as good as yours, so you're definitely doing a lot of great work out there.
Or you're just exhausted when your head hits the pillow. You're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sleep hits me like, it's rest again, like you mentioned before too, right? Rest was perceived as something as laziness. And so it's still something that I'm still getting used to. I feel like I'm always on my foot. I easily can do 10,000 steps without even doing a marathon.
I bet.
So yeah, I do. But at the same time, I think when I first started therapy, how I started was with a lot of fear, a lot of fear and like anxiety, like, oh my God, I have so much trauma and I have two kids and I still have trouble regulating myself. And then my kid has ADHD, so he has behavioral changes. He's more vocal. He has his outburst. Instead of me being labeled as the bad parent, oh my God, you're not doing a good job, you should really slap him. Like, there's so many comments, there's so many parental pressure. And South Asian community, obviously, parenting concept, again, it's something very new. It really started from our generation.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That is. And one thing that really makes me feel at peace is that concept of, if there is a damage, there is repair. And that is something that I tell my family all the time. Me and my son, actually, we talked about it. He mentioned about that meme. You know that meme that says emotional damage?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was telling him and he's 10. For this past 10 years, I fully have that open communication with him. And I'm like, I can feel like there was a lot of emotional damage because you keep saying these memes. I know you said in a comedy way, but let's talk about this. And then he was like, you know what? Yeah, I feel like we're doing a lot of healing, and maybe we should make a reel with all the repairs that we've done, that we have done over all the, decade of damage. And that concept, that hopefulness, that if there's a damage, there's always a repair. Again, what is trauma, right? Trauma, a person will go, let's say you and I went through the same thing, but when you were traumatized and you went into a traumatic event, you had your mom, you had your dad, you had your teacher, you had your sibling, you had someone safe to give you that mental support. Whereas someone, let's say, for example, me, I went through the same thing, but I had no support and I sat with it alone.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about my time with my dad,
Yeah.
right? I talk
Connect.
about my dad. Again, connection is through stories, right? So you have to really understand, how do we understand what our kids are feeling and which words we should use to that resonates with themselves. Like we have to understand that they're 4, they're 9. We have to come up with words that will resonate with themselves. Make it simple, make it consistent. So sharing stories, laughing about it. I mean, grief, like it hits you like a wave. It's in waves.
Mm-hmm.
Grief will come when I pick up a chips bag that my dad used to buy for me, or like the mango that he used to buy for me. So it will hit you anywhere. And taking that moment to recognize it and sharing it with my child.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Share it with your child. Why would I be alone? And this is something that we all need to work as a team. Again, you have to be careful that you're not trauma dumping, because I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
boomers have done that subconsciously. They have trauma dumped
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're like, oh, okay, I'm sad, so hear me out.
Yeah.
But we want to hear their part as well.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think you make a really important point as a parent. It is very important that I always feel, and I try to say that the brain is science. And so it means science is just, there's no emotions in science. This is the way it is. And the brain develops exactly the same. Of course, there's side quests if your child experiences some kind of trauma, some kind of accident, some sort of life significant event. But even in that, as you're saying, the quicker we get to it, the faster the process to healing can happen. It doesn't mean healing just happens overnight. It's a process.
No,
but
exactly.
Brain development is exactly the same from infancy all the way through the lifespan. And so if we are raising infants to toddler and then school age, middle school, all that, we have technology at our hands. We can Google this now. We can take books out. We can learn how to meet your child exactly where they're at. There are ages and there are stages. So when we are fearful or oh, can my child understand this? Look it up. Talk to a therapist, talk to a mental health professional, take out a book. It will easily break down the science of your child's development so that at the age of 4, there is a way to talk about grief, and it's very different than at the age of 14. And we just have to meet our kids where they're at. I think that that's part of co-regulation too, is knowing what they need and meeting them where they're at. But a lot of us, when we haven't been given that, when we don't have that skill, again, if you don't have it, you don't sometimes realize you're missing it. And so it does take a lot of curiosity to want to learn these things. And you don't have to have a very traumatic childhood in the way Shuraya did to have this kind of intelligence in parenting. You could have the most chillest upbringing and still not know what to do with your children. So I think it's just a matter of how curious we're willing to get around, oh, that's common. That is what a 4-year-old does. That's what a 6-year-old does. And then it also helps us understand if there's milestones our kids aren't hitting that we can get in and help them with, like speech or language and those kinds of things too. I think your point is so bang on about meet your kid with where they're at and figure out, and you can get ahead. I love that brain development. It's my favorite. I have been saying it before I have kids. I officially have a 14-year-old. So let's see if I feel this way by the time he hits 18. But if you can figure out the algorithm, you can work with it. You know what I mean? The good news is there's information. The bad news is there's a lot of information out there.
There's a lot of information.
So you have to work through contradiction and all that kind of stuff. But find 1-2 people you really trust, you really look up to, and those are the people we go to say, hey, help me out.
That is. And I am blessed to have very, very few women, but enough for me to feel validated, feel seen, and they are my core. You do need that. You do need that kind of sense of assurance as well while you're trying to figure out, because it's like an urgent thing, right? I feel like like it's urgent, guys. It's not like, oh, he'll figure it out. Like, sure, he'll figure it out. It's good to teach kids independence, but when they're a child, emotions are pretty, like, big emotions are pretty big. Like, it's not that hard to just sit with them and not just to do rushed, how's the day?
I remember my sister and
Yeah,
I talking about this, and I
yeah.
learned this with the young people that I used to work with, because I was exactly like, yeah, it's fine. And then you ask yes or no questions, but you have to, like,
Mm-hmm.
what's one thing in your day that made you laugh? What's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that you actually learned? Because, the kids will be like, I didn't learn anything at school. And so you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, okay. So, well, we have to, again, observe, okay, maybe I got to help my kid learn how to communicate. I have one kid that can communicate very well, too well. And then I have
Mm-hmm.
one that
Mm-hmm.
needs some coaching and help. He knows what he
Of
wants to
course.
say, but his
Yeah.
processing speed isn't quite where,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we are. And
Yeah.
so we have to learn how to meet him where he's at and help him
Yeah.
learn that skill. And I think that sometimes the other piece is when we're parenting, we think, well, how did two people give birth and raise in the same house, all these kids, and they're so different? But I think we forget, like, we're all different humans. Every time we have like,
Yeah.
who I was when I had my first son wasn't
Mm-hmm.
who I was when I had my second son. I may
No.
not have realized that, but
Yeah.
postpartum, health issues, work,
Mm-hmm.
all life, day-to-day stuff that we all have to manage when we have children. We're not the same people, so we can't expect our kids are going to be exactly the same. But I think it all comes down to, as we've been saying, that curiosity, just investigate a little bit more of, like, where is this coming from? Because there's always a path versus they're defiant, like you said, or they're lazy, they're bad.
I would say before all that, yes, get your inner child work done because
Okay,
you really
let's stay there.
understand.
All right.
Yeah, no, really, because if you don't have that done, it's really, really, it would be so easy to disregard or be dismissive of your kids' emotions and how they operate and how they think and everything. So
Okay, so let's
definitely,
stay there for a second. So when we talk
okay.
about inner child, I think you're absolutely right. I'm sorry I skipped a beat there. Um, how does one go there, though? When you talk about do your inner child work, for someone that's never heard this or isn't really clear, how would you explain this, and what would you suggest and where to start for them?
I would say inner child work, it would be really doing the inner deep work, which is really ask yourself, what am I afraid of when September 2nd comes? A lot of parents are showing a lot of emotions now. It's not just the kids are overwhelmed. Like my son is going to a new new school. He's going to be in grade 5. New school, you have idea. It's very overwhelming. There's a lot of anxiety. But guess what? Your child can see and sense your anxiety.
Mm.
So parents are also very anxious, and that is why inner child work is important. Because as soon as you realize, wait a minute, like September 2nd is coming, there's only 10 more days. Why am I stressed? What can I do to self-regulate and to be there for my kids? Because they're a child, I'm the parent. How can I be there for them? That's why the inner child work is important, because I can see it. I myself can feel it at times too. That yeah. So ask yourself, what is it exactly? Is it the routine? Is it about the freedom of giving up morning, like sleep in? Is it about the attitude that when my son comes from school, he's going to have this attitude, like he's going to be very tired. Like, what is it that you are really afraid of? And kind of understand that, and then help yourself, help your son prepare for the real world. Again, kids are they tune in your stress more than
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
And so you don't really want to subconsciously pass that on.
Yeah.
You want them to really ask themselves, right, that, oh my god, I'm going to be starting school. Why am I scared? Write it down. Why am I scared? Do you want to talk to your friends who are also going to the same school, right?
Right.
Do you want to talk to your dad about it? Because your dad also went to grade 5. So I would tell my husband to share stories about grade 5 and share not just the joyful things, but the anxiety part, the fear of not belonging, fear
Mm-hmm.
of being neglected, fear of bullying, right? That's a number one thing. Fear of not fitting in. All these concepts are valid. these worries are valid, recognize them and
Yeah.
talk about it. That's really it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's bang on, is asking yourself, okay, like, yeah, what am I afraid? What am I worried about? Working backwards from there. And I think you're absolutely right. When we're in the driver's seat, it helps us understand where we're coming from and where our anxiety is coming from. And it's often we need control, unknown. There's 10,000 forms to fill out. There is a lot that goes from a slow paced summer to, now routines and all these expectations. And what I love about what you're saying is also the connection piece. So a father and son in particular, how you talk about, again, to, a growing boy becoming a man, and a man having these conversations that a lot of young boys have not really had growing up with their dads. What do boys talk to their dads about? What do dads talk to their boys about? I think that's another topic we should do, because it's starting, but it's not common. And so you're kind of around each other, but yeah, how do you have those intimate conversations around what are we worried about? And I love what you're saying is label it. Like, okay, we're all stressed. We're all running around like, something wild's going on. Sorry that we're arguing. Let's just stop for a second and recognize, oh, there's a lot of worry in the room right now because school starts tomorrow, or school started yesterday, or wherever we're at. Some people are already in school. So I think not hiding it, as we've been saying, calling it as it's coming. And it actually helps us feel more in charge than trying to control something that's just so dumb when we try to do it's fine. It's not, because I'm losing my mind right now. And or there's grief. Like, parents are experiencing grief in their baby going to preschool. Their adolescent becoming an adult and graduating. Like, there's a lot of transitions with our kids' development that is exciting on one hand, but also some grief. And I'm losing a part of you every year that I'm not going to get. And I think that's also like, when we stop and allow ourselves a transition, we can actually slow down and ask ourselves, what's going on in my world right now? What am I happy, sad, like, as you said, worried about, versus just here we are, we're at school now, and okay, but we didn't talk about the big things. So
and that's the thing, right? And so don't wait to have that conversation the first week of school. Like, why wait? We know September 2nd. Great. Let's start talking about it now. Let's start planning. Let's start sharing stories. Why don't you? Because actually, I'm going to do that this week. I will be walking with him to school while sharing the stories. So even the walk that he's going to do to his new school doesn't feel as foreign.
Yes.
Right.
Excellent.
Familiarity and being similar, feeling the familiar feelings, it brings comfort.
Yes.
It brings safety. So, I mean, what's stopping me? I mean, in Calgary, we're blessed to have a long day. Sunset's like 10:30.
Yeah.
Why don't you just go out for a walk the same route? And it's not just to teach lessons kind of moment. It's more just casually walking and sharing stories and sharing, because it is also for yourself as well.
Yes.
Like, you're also doing inner child work. Like, I don't remember my parents doing that, because again, we were in a survival mode. We came from another country. We moved to Canada. I was on my own and I didn't know a single word of English. So that is very scary.
For sure.
Why don't we just relive our childhood as we go through middle school again? And it's fun. It's fun to connect when you connect with your kids.
Like you said, I like the piece about how this connects to inner child work is sometimes we as adults have to give ourselves the things that we didn't get in the way that we hoped for or didn't even realize we needed as children. And so this helps us manage resentment, anger, upsetness, blame, all those things that we really don't have control over, but are important to work through. And one way is with our children to relive some of those experiences, and also understanding your kid is different than you. Like, there's not going to be exactly the same, but we're doing something, we're creating momentum, and we're working through it. And I know I can definitely agree with you when my kids and I have had those kind of moments together. My kid's been in trouble. He's been suspended from school, comes home, and tells me, and we have this conversation, and I already know because the school called. And I remember one of the two suspensions, great mom, right? And he's like, thank you for not yelling and screaming at me. And we had to talk about that. I was like, that was a lot of fear-based parenting I grew up with.
Yeah.
And, your grandparents thought that was a way to do it. A lot of us kids grew up that way. And I didn't really learn a
Yeah.
whole lot, but to be afraid and to hide many things. And
Yeah.
I'm mad, I'm upset, but like it matters more. Are you disappointed? Like, where are you at? What's your stance on why this happened? And we want to make this a learning experience. And I remember my brother came over, and I grew up in a home where the collective care was, I think, helped me like literally survive adolescence, where I had aunts and uncles and grandparents I loved so much and I never wanted to disappoint. So we would always
Yeah.
be very open about whatever good and bad would happen. So my kids know they have that with my sister and brother and my parents. And so my brother comes over, my son, I say, okay, tell Kamamu like what happened. And he has to tell Kamamu, and Kamamu does his own sidebar conversation with him. And my brother even said to him, he said, you know what? I just want you to know, like, you are growing in a very different pace than your mom and I grew up in. And I hope you acknowledge and understand that, because we would have just got our asses kicked. And you are having like a process, whatever that means, conversation. And I was like, that's so kind that my brother himself acknowledged that. And then my kids are not having to hear that from me. Like, oh, great. Now my mom thinks she's the best thing in the world because she's breaking a barrier. But okay, like, we also don't want to take for granted that we're having a safe conversation. And when we screw it up, and it, there's times where it didn't go so well, and you lose your cool because you didn't regulate yourself, right? That's how it all is. If you chalk it back up to, was your day good or bad or ugly? Was I the adult regulated? And when I didn't sleep and had a shitty conversation, or I didn't eat well and had whatever, all those things that regulate me, and I didn't do it, I think that's where like you said, we got to go back and we got to own it, and we have to redo something so that we show that, okay, we're learning from it, instead of unfinished business, which a lot of us have had too much conflict avoidance growing up, and then we're pleasers. A lot of people pleasing comes out of that too, because it's a safe mechanism, and we have enough of those in our generation. We don't need to coddle more people pleasers out there. So I think the inner child stuff is a great way to figure out simple things like our children's back to school transition, their growth, just in, okay, how am I regulating myself? How do I got to get better at this? Anything you would add in this part?
No, honestly, I think you summarized it pretty well. But yeah, parenting, that's just what it is. Again, the parenting concept, right? It just brings out your own stuff. So it's time that we own up and we take accountability. And like I said, parents will snap. Parents will lose their shit. Parents will, also have anger that they will show some way or another. There's repair.
Yeah.
Okay. Something happened. Okay. Take that half an hour or 15 minutes time at nighttime to acknowledge that, to apologize to your child, right? To apologize to your child and to own that emotion and acknowledge that, hey, I wasn't so nice when I got angry at that time, and I have said some harsh words. I'm sorry about that. How did that make you feel? Let's talk about it.
Hey, like an adult asking you how you feel. Like, these soft landings have so much strength behind them. Like being asked, like we were always the kids should not be, they shouldn't talk. You're just a child. You don't know anything. And when we help our kids grow up with a voice, that also is helping them understand how to rely on themselves in unsafe situations and count on themselves when we're not around. And that's the whole point. We're trying to raise them so that, my sister thinks I'm morbid whenever I say this, but I'm like, if I wake up dead tomorrow, at least my kids will know something in some way of managing themselves. And that's the whole point, is we want them to be able to live without us. Like, that's the goal at the end of the day.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Whether they move out or not, that's different. They can live with me forever. But apart from that, we want. So can we talk a little bit, because we mentioned co-regulation, and one of the things that you have said so well that I sort of summarized was, it's important as adults, as the parents, we learn what our way of regulating is. In the beginning, we talked about emotional regulation, what happens when we're off and we don't have transition or moments to pause, and how that impacts our nervous system, and both of them impact each other. And you've shared some examples here where there's been issues in the home and how you've gone back and had these conversations. And we can really only do that when we as the adult have ourselves at a regulated state. No matter how upset we are at what happened, we have to come at it from a place that leaves them learning something and not, in a worse place. Anything you want to add to that piece about co-regulation?
I think I would have to give credit to my husband because he's the calm one in the family. He does have, obviously everyone has anxiety. He's just, targeted like some other places, but my anxiety, I'm just an anxious person, especially in the morning. That's what my psychiatrist said. My anxiety level is the highest at 8 a.m. as a mother. And I didn't know that. So apparently when you're getting anxious is important. Is it at nighttime or is it at daytime? And daytime is because how I do it, my brain right now, because it's so hard. When I wake up, by the way, like my husband, when he wakes up, he takes his time. He will brush his teeth. He'll have his coffee, chill. My eyes are open. I'm awake. I'm rising. It's almost like I am talking so much. And he's like, oh my goodness, this energy. So he understands that this energy is not just an outer thing. Imagine inside, what is my brain going to for me to run from one spot to the other? So I recognized it. So I used to be last minute as well. So let's say his school was 8. I will wake up at 7. So then he pointed out, he's like, why don't you wake up just 15 minutes earlier? Just 10, 15 minutes earlier. And that made a big change. I wasn't rushing him. Right? I wasn't rushing him. And stress, I think ADHD has a lot to do with stress as well. It's how you cope with stress too. And when we get out, like that whole spot where we wear shoes and socks, that's the most stressful place in the house.
Yeah. And because time management is like, it works so different. My sister, I'm now understanding why we always have the issues with her growing up, because she's diagnosed later as a woman and then her childhood. And my son, same thing. And one of the strategies the psychologist taught us was lists. Like you are his external brain. So while he's learning these strategies, like you got to stop telling him. It doesn't mean anything. Write it down with him. Get him to write it. And then a timer. So he knows, okay, I have 60 minutes to leave the house, and then not every 5 minutes because he's going to want to punch you, but quarter, 10 minutes, just little reminders. And like, literally my husband and I were like, man, and listen, I went to mental health school. For anyone else out there that's like feeling like, how am I supposed to know this? I hear you, because I should know this. This was my schooling, but when you're so in something, you don't think of these things. So we have to have this compassion and grace. And this is why reaching out and getting someone else's help is so meaningful, because he explained my son's whole brain cycle to us. And we were like, oh my gosh. Like today he got 13 things done on a list in the time he was supposed to. But if it was before us learning this, my husband, I would hear him probably still arguing with him. You know what I mean? It's like it's our responsibility, and we can't operate from they should just know.
Yeah, we do routine, visual. They're highly visual learner. And I feel like, if you list them, if you have a visual, chart or stuff like that, and they're very competitive too. So the same thing, even when I'm warming, in the microwave, I never want to hear that ding. Ding. I don't want to hear it. So if I'm warming a food for like 30 seconds, I will open it at 29. It's just, I guess, overstimulation sounds, right? Because there's so much in our head. extra sounds. We're very tuned into our environment. Again, mine is different. I have a lot of PTSD from my childhood experience of
Right.
being in unpredictable. I was always like, like I mentioned the other episode, being in a 24/7 security alarm, making sure everybody's regulated. I definitely didn't regulate myself in any way. So I'm doing that now.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to, yeah, no, that's a very good example that you shared, actually. Thank you. I do like that, like that timer example and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's the beauty is we get to have these lovely professionals that are doing all the good work. And when we go and talk to them, they really are helpful. They are able to provide strategies. Sure, we can look it up. I know there's a lot of stuff on TikTok, but again, I always just say we just have to be mindful, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everyone we shares personal experiences, and sometimes it can get tricky when it's mental health stuff. So I
Yeah.
always say you do this at your own discretion and all that too.
Mhm.
But yeah, there are professionals out there that, like, you have a psychiatrist, and the experience we had with this psychologist too was really, really
Mhm.
great, and someone that can talk to you. Sometimes you go see a doctor and there's really good doctors that explain it without the medical jargon. And then there's a doctors where you're
Mhm.
like, I have no idea what that meant. I think that makes all the difference too, is
Oh yeah.
feeling connected to someone that's going to help you understand at the pace you're at, which is what we've been talking about with parenting, right? We have to do it at our kids' pace, more
Yeah.
so at our own pace. And the beauty of relearning all these things for the
Mhm.
first time as we do it with our kids. So we covered a
Exactly.
little bit about ADHD, and we covered a little bit about transitions and some bigger sort of pieces that are about learning how to regulate ourselves, really spending the time to get to know how and what was it like for me as a child. What are the good things I got that I carried forward? What are the things that I'm realizing I didn't get? And how am I managing with that? The inner child work, as you suggested. We've talked about understanding how our nervous system and emotional regulation plays such a huge part. And then when you have something like ADHD on top of it, it does make it even more challenging for children and adults. So there has to be an understanding when we're tending to what we call quote unquote behavior, when
Mhm.
that's just a symptom, that's just a sign,
Mhm.
that's a cue. So you can't take the behavior as the answer to whatever's he's yelling, he's defiant. No, 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 no. No child is
Mhm.
defiant. No child is manipulative.
No.
Manipulative.
Yeah.
It's they're getting their needs met, and sometimes we
Mhm.
as adults get our needs met with negative coping strategies too. Our kids learn these things, as you have said, from us. So if we're not in
Exactly.
check,
Yeah.
our kids are going to also pick it up in that way. So
Oh yeah.
maybe, and we talked about some very tangible tools like timers and visuals, writing it down lists, as well
Mhm.
as naming it as it's happening. So if we're back to
Mhm.
school and we're all stressed out and yelling and, sad and stuff, don't sweep it under the carpet. Talk about it, ask
Mhm.
about it. We also talked about prepare. So I
Mhm.
love you and your son are going to be going for the walk to get ready for school. So he
Yeah.
feels like he's good, he's in charge. And then you're going to have an
Yeah.
opportunity to talk about whatever comes up between you two, stories,
Mhm.
moments, silence, all of that. So I think we're
Mhm.
covering a lot of big, small, huge tools for when we're working through
Mhm.
transitions. Is there something that you feel we should cover that maybe we haven't? And I know we didn't talk yet about when you're parenting a child with ADHD, or you're in a
Mhm.
relationship with someone with ADHD, that impacts the marriage too. So if you don't have
Mhm.
anything more to add to that, then maybe we can cover that a little bit.
We've always, heard about that phrase about don't fight in front of the kids, right? It's again, we don't want to confuse the kids, right? About like the parents' perspective. So fight in your own space. And again, your kids are gonna hear it. Your kids are going to see it sometimes, which is fine. But again, damage comes with repair. Give yourself some grace. But at the same time, yeah, it's a lot of marriage work as well that go hand in hand with parenting.
Yeah.
And change, like I mentioned before, change brings change. I was diagnosed I was recognizing my anxiety. I take anxiety pills in the morning as well and all that. So he almost like, I would say for good 6 years, he was like, yeah, I don't have anxiety. I don't have it. I don't have anxiety. I mean, after all, you were the one who got medicated. So
Mm.
clearly you are. And I think, yeah, and that kind of, dismissiveness, you really feel lonely. And so all that happened while we were parenting. Tough time, very, very tough time. But we're at a point where, yes, we got couple therapy. He got tuned into his emotions. He's doing his inner child work now, which is, again, never too late.
It's interesting. You're also sharing how your anxiety comes out versus how his anxiety comes out. And I think that's an important point because we don't all channel these things in the same way. And sometimes we
Hmm.
expect it. So do you have any examples that come to mind when you think about the work you're doing and the work that your husband's getting into about his own stuff? I know we don't want to talk on behalf of him. I know he's not here, but just like what you can share in terms of like the
Yeah.
marriage, because we're talking about parenting stress impacts couples, right? Like that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, it goes back to the inner child work, right?
Right. Yeah.
So again, for us to be in the same parenting, I mean, parenting style, you do want to make sure that both partners, both of you guys have the same sort of parenting style. And even if you don't, kind of check in on it and respect that they are going to deal with this way, and I'm fine with it. And I'm not going to intrude and say, "Hey, why are you talking to him like that? Let's figure that out before," and stuff like that.
But can I just add, I think an
Yeah.
important point what you're making is what's connected to learning your each other's parenting styles comes from how we were parented. So
Yes.
we either tend to do this a similar version or the
Mm-hmm.
complete opposite of what was done. So I think you're right. It's recognizing, oh yeah, again, everything's connected to my childhood in how I choose
Yeah.
to parent or not parent my child, or if I'm having a reaction or triggered by my partner's way
Yeah.
of wanting to
Yeah.
parent. I think all of those come up in the stressors
Mm.
of trying to be a team together, as you're saying.
Of course. And for him, the number one triggering, let's say when he would kind of explode, like inside and outside, would be my big emotions will make him anxious. So showing any sort of big emotions. So big emotions can be panic attacks, like, overwhelmingness or, anxiety or even like stressed out, like in a physical way, we can sense more. That kind of triggers him because again, it was not something that was encouraged when he went through it as a child. So now seeing me react this way, he would, at the beginning, that's literally what he said. He's like, you're the only one who has panic attack, right? And I was like, was it hurtful at that time? Hell yeah, that was
Yeah.
very hurtful. It was very hurtful. But of course, again, like I said, with couple therapy, him, first of all, being willing to work things together, it's something to be appreciated about. And I feel like there will be at a point where you will break down and you will see no path and it's just nothing out there. And all you see is your family and someone who is literally fighting to make the parenting, the kids, and the marriage work. It's time to step back and kind of take accountability how your words can impact your partner
Yeah,
and your child.
for sure.
So he recognized it and he's working on it, and again, that's now causing a lot of resentment. It's finally he's doing the hard work and looking back into his childhood and asking himself, wait a minute, so when I reacted that way, why did my mom tell me to shut up or like stop? Like people are watching. Like people are watching. That's something that he grew up with a lot. It's like people are watching. So you feel very critical of yourself. So then to mask your criticalness, you criticize others and you judge others subconsciously.
Yep.
And it's pretty negative. It's not a healthy way to cope with your emotions. But yeah, he's definitely learning.
And especially as you said,
Yeah.
he's someone who's of avoidant anxiety. So
Yes.
a lot, when you look at him, you would think he's calm, cool, collected, but he's going through his own inner dialogue
Oh
of
yeah.
all the wrong things that could be going on, which then
Yes.
causes him, like your example of the vacation, for him, it's so stressful that he'd say, let's just not even go. where for
Mm-hmm.
you talk it
Mm-hmm.
out, you get it out, and you're like, I know it's going to be chaotic, and I'll be
Yeah.
part of the chaos, but let's go and
Yeah.
experience it. And so how does
Yeah.
your style and his style, like, how does it mesh together? How do you guys make that work? Because those are very different ways of managing anxiety. So what's working for you two in acknowledging that?
Because we're kind of not too late, because it's never too late to kind of do the deep work, but because we're at this stage where we have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, we're in a critical time to give the best memory for our kids.
Mm.
And our kids, and I feel like once you recognize that we missed out a lot on our childhood, you want to do the best thing for your kids, right? So that sort of urgency kind of comes naturally after you do the inner work. And I feel like now we're actively making it a habit to go out as a family to bike together. When he goes to grocery, before he would never take my son with him to grocery shopping because he's like, he would delay it. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's just get it done. He will
Yeah.
delay it. I'm like, so what's the rush?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, in
Good
a bad
question.
shop, you have to kind of remind him something. What is the rush?
But see,
Right?
that's that
Just
what we
like,
talked about in the
mhm.
beginning, that go, go, go. Like the more I get done, the
Yes.
better. We
Yeah.
didn't really understand what a process environment is, where who cares how much
Hmm.
we get done? It's the quality of what. We're just like,
Yeah.
get everything crossed off the list. Go,
Get
go,
it done.
go.
Yeah.
So that's a great
And
question of, yeah, what's the rush?
what's the rush? And he does get that from his mom.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we know we're going, she still does that because she's still anxious, and it still has that impact if we are around her for a very long time. It impacts us because
Yes.
anxiety just travels everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So if we tell her 4 o'clock we'll go to a picnic together as a family, since 11 a.m. she's already thinking about it, getting ready for it. I can feel the anxiety since 11.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're excited, but where's this anxiety coming from, right? So to avoid any sort of barbecue, he just doesn't plan any anymore,
Right.
right? Because he doesn't want to feel what he have felt when he was a kid, and he didn't know what to do with it. So he dismisses it. So now that he's recognized it, now we're making it a habit, because again, everything can be learned. Habits are not permanent. I think it's very important to learn habits are not permanent. Just because they're 60-year-old, it's their habit. Yeah, it's maybe hard, but it's not permanent. And I hear my therapist say, I have 80-year-old coming to me to heal themselves.
Yeah.
So and I feel like if we recognize that habits are not permanent and it's something that we can establish by practice,
Yes.
you can accomplish anything. Yeah.
And if the brain has neural
Mhm.
pathways, which is how we form these habits and we learn, we can, yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but just like you
Mhm.
learned that habit, your brain can be taught how to unlearn it. And I
Yeah.
think it's absolutely possible. It's, do I care enough or want to, or whatever the reasons behind it that stop us. But
Mhm.
it's absolutely possible if 80-year-olds are showing up in therapy wanting to learn. And that's just it. It's like, we do get to this place where as we get older, we think less and less about longevity and the importance of quality of care. We think, oh, I'm getting closer to it. Who cares? Just accept it. Sure, some
Mm.
things accept, like maybe you won't get forgiveness from that person, or, you have to find that within yourself. But you also don't have to accept that my quality of care is just going to be mediocre because I'm getting older. And I think there are many ways to live out the rest of our life
Yeah.
fulfilled as possible.
Oh, yeah.
There's always that discretion, but as possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
I think, I think like it's so important to acknowledge, as we have been, that parenting stress bleeds into marriage if it's unmanaged.
Mhm.
And the stress is going to be there regardless, no matter how
Mhm.
good of a team you are. It's
Mhm.
acknowledging the patterns, the signs, and a lot of what you're saying. And how do I process that? How do I manage that? Where did that come from? Again, goes back to my
Mhm.
childhood. And so
Mhm.
now, how do I manage this? Because I
Mhm.
don't want to be in the same place as where I was as a child. I want to be able to do
Oh
something
yeah.
different with my kids. So even so, some tools and tricks to put in our Tiffin. You
Mm-hmm.
talked about check-in. So even if it's a 5-minute check-in
Mm-hmm.
daily, a grounding thing, whether it's the beginning, end of the day, middle of the day, whatever works for you, but even 5 minutes
Mm-hmm.
of hello, how are you? What's going on? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever your quick check-in is, but a way to stay connected together. Because I mean, my husband and I have been together now for 24 years.
Wow.
Early September here, we'll be married for, I believe, 18 years, 17, 18
Wow.
years. Oh my God, 17 years. I can't
Crazy.
remember. It's
Wow.
a long time. And, we talk
Yeah.
about how codependency, resentment, joy, all these kinds of crazy ass emotions and feelings can develop when you're in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with your partner. I mean, you've been with
Mm-hmm.
your partner for a long time too. The key is that, like you said, we're continuing to figure out how to best communicate. How we communicated when we were in our 20s is going to be very different now that we're in our mid to late 40s. That's just because we evolve, we're different, we have different needs to meet. But can we still keep opening the lines to communication? Otherwise, as those lines, it's like when drains get clogged, we know what happens. You have big
Mm-hmm.
plumbing issues, everything backs up and backfires. So the rituals that we create should be just like with the parenting, safe and in some ways predictable. We know we're going to do the once a week
Mm-hmm.
dinner. Yes, you want
Yeah.
to be spontaneous and whatever, but we have to have a baseline that
Mm-hmm.
allows us to check in with each other, and also outside of our kids. Like, we started together without children, and we're probably going to end with each other without children. So how do we
Mm-hmm.
maintain this middle part with sometimes it's okay to talk about things that are not to do with kids. Like co-regulate before problem solving. So did I eat? Did I sleep? You said your
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is at the highest in the morning. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned your husband's is later on. So are
Yeah.
these the best times for us to have really big, like planning a vacation? Is it best for you to plan a vacation first thing in the morning or for him at night? Like
Exactly.
you said, when
Yeah.
you get to the root of how you operate,
Mm-hmm.
how your machinery works, then, we can build the manual too, right? And otherwise we're like, I don't know, what's this button for? Don't press it. Don't press my buttons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, why did I have that reaction? Well, I had that reaction because I don't work well when I don't eat,
Yeah. The
Like,
hangry. Oh my goodness,
woo,
the hangry. That's
right?
something I had to. I
Yeah.
had to recognize. I had to tell him what a hangry was. Actually, when I got married,
You
he
invented
didn't even know
it.
that concept. Yeah, he just didn't know. All his mom would say is, "Oh, he's hungry. I mean, he's hungry, so that's why he's being mean." Yeah, he can be hungry. He can be angry and hungry at the same time, but he doesn't get to still say harsh words to me when he's angry.
Yeah.
So like
100%.
recognizing that, and I did had to hear it, and I had to point that out to him and say, you can be hangry, that's totally fine, but you cannot hurt someone while you're hangry.
And when that
So
sinks in, it's
yeah.
also celebrating like small wins. Like that's a
Mm-hmm.
great thing to celebrate. Yay, we figured out something that works for
Yeah.
us. And we should also
Yeah.
acknowledge that, because we're so good at pointing out issues, flaws, strategies we need, all these things. But if we're a team, we also should point out the things we're doing well, too. Otherwise, it's
Absolutely.
like, gosh, what's the point? Okay, so we're kind of saying kids learn healthier strategies when parents are able to narrate regulation, self-care, take care of ourselves. We have each other and ourselves as individuals. So I think, maybe we can, as we conclude here, how can we as a community or communities, and this isn't just parents, but just as a community, we have a responsibility with the future and all the kids growing. What is
Mhm.
one way you feel we can be paying attention to creating space of support for kids and families?
I think just when again empathy, like
Mm.
I mentioned, I think at the end, empathy is something that has to be taught to your kids constantly. At least when they're young, just so they can recognize or tune into how others are feeling. It's very different than being people pleaser. I
Mm-hmm.
think people pleaser is literally dismissing your own emotions and just kind of tending to other people's emotions, where this one is recognizing and understanding others and putting yourself into their shoe. and also being able to label stuff. And I think as a family, when we're together, but why don't we talk about triggers? Why don't we talk about fears? Why do we dismiss that? Why do we avoid that? These kind of conversation.
Why do you
Yeah,
think?
they're hard. They're hard. It's almost like it's hard to kind of talk about it. You avoid it because it's just something that you've already dealt with, and then you don't want to talk about it again. But at the same time, the pressure is less. Let's say if there is four couples, I would 100% talk about my triggers. Or like kids are walking trigger bombs. They are walking trigger bombs, and every single parent, no matter what kind of healthy or unhealthy or what kind of environment you grew up in, they
Yeah.
are somewhere or another going to trigger you in some ways. And so let's talk about it. And I feel like when you hear other couples sharing like their parenting strategies and stuff like that, you kind of don't feel alone,
Yes.
right?
So the
Yeah,
isolation kind of like
the
goes away.
isolation.
You go to your kid's friend's birthday party, and how powerful is it when another mom or parent says, "How are you doing?" And you, instead of saying, "We're doing really good," you're like, "Not so good this week." We whatever
Yeah.
happened or whatnot. And it's not shaming yourself, your family, but it's like you're feeling those things. Why? And you know what? If I share that with you, that might even make you want to say, "Oh, thank God you're saying that, because I
Yeah.
also had a really crappy day. I didn't even almost make it to this birthday party today." And okay,
Mm-hmm.
now for 20 minutes, we can both talk about how this isn't how we planned out motherhood or parenting or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then you get it out. And then when you get it out, you're like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is what it is. I can maybe do something about it." But yeah,
Yeah.
there's too much of the mentality to buckle up and look good and act
And again,
good.
parental pressure, social media, like when you
Yeah.
scroll through it, you see everybody's doing, mother baking, sourdough bread at 6 a.m. with their kids, or like you will
What
see a
the? Yeah.
4-year-old, like, washing dishes with the, rinsing. And there's a lot of parental pressure more than ever than the previous generation. And previous generation, if we were out in the sun for 12 hours, our parents wouldn't be out looking for us. We would go, we
Well,
just kind
some of
of,
us weren't allowed to leave the home, but hey, for sure.
yeah,
There, but
some of
but
us were
but
not,
you're
yeah.
right, and I think it's a good reminder. Like, these are social media snapshots, so we can't get tricked by when one of us posts a happy moment. That's a
Mm-hmm.
fleeing moment, and maybe that person had a crappy week and they really wanted to share the good week, or maybe they're faking. I don't know, whatever their
Mm-hmm.
reason is, but I cannot get connected and attached to that apart from that's
No.
them, and
Yeah.
their good picture doesn't add or take away from whatever my life is like with my children. And I think you're right. We have to really cut that anxiety and that pressure out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
social media is like such a small part of the big picture, and only few brave people will post the true harsh reality of what might be going on in their world. And like, I think we have to take it with a grain of salt when you see the beautifully polished people on there, because
Yeah.
that's just the moment. Let them have it.
Yeah.
That's
Let
it.
them have it. And then, let alone if you visit the comment section, that's even more,
Oh.
that's even, that's even more demotivating, I think. Like so many opinions and stuff like that. It's so much pressure.
Yeah,
I
because there's
think,
so much resentment out there,
yeah,
and we're
so
not
much
dealing with
resentment.
what's in our own
Mm-hmm.
tiffin. We're looking at each other's, tiffin, saying, "Oh, what'd you bring today?" And like, start with
Yeah.
our own. Like you said, open your own, tiffin, smell your own lunch before you start sniffing other people's lunch out. Like, we
Yeah.
got our own stuff to be excited about, not excited about. But when
Yes.
we project like that, it's because we're putting our own expectations of ourselves out on others.
Mm-hmm.
It's rarely
Mm-hmm.
that it's, "I have this expectation of you." So what people
Mm-hmm.
will think has a lot to do with what I think, more than
Mm-hmm.
what it is that they think. But we like to put it out there instead of bring it inward. So that's
Oh, yeah.
the scary thing of how our children are growing into that world, and it becomes a reality. Those comments become their friends or their enemies or whatnot. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, "What? I can't even understand what emoji this is." Like, I'm just on the hearts. That's it. The red hearts. That's it.
Well, I know, and like, look at it, skibidi made into the Western dictionary, right? You know what I
I
mean?
know.
So
It's
there's
so
so much
dumb.
learning. It's just never ending. So you have to kind of remind yourself
Yeah.
that, yeah, yeah,
So what
look
do
at the bigger
you
picture.
look at the bigger
Yeah.
picture? So what would you want every parent that's, listening today on YouTube, wherever they are getting this episode from, like, what do you hope that they pack in their Tiffin toolkit for the season?
It's gonna be annoying now, but I'm gonna go with inner child work.
Yeah.
I think we have already had enough generations neglecting themselves and self-awareness to the point where we don't even recognize them as our own, and we tend to blame others for our perspective, even if it's negative perspective. We like to blame others,
Yeah.
and the blaming part will shift if you take accountability and look deep upon yourself and really see what am I doing to prepare myself for the school. Because again, remember, we're all a teamwork. We're all a team. If your kid is starting new school, you're also starting a new school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So recognize that, like, that for you, it's also anxiety thing that you have to also deal with on your own, and then find words, find ways that will resonate with your kids now.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing them all upset and tired after the first week and say, already, you just had a fantastic summer. It's only been a week. But, instead of saying that and again blaming, take accountability, look back and really see what was the disconnection and why, what can we do to help them kind of feel that freedom of expression. Like, you want to create a safe space
Yeah.
after all. You
Yeah.
don't want them to suppress.
Middle fingers up. What do you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
Oh my goodness. There's so many middle fingers up I want to do. To just abuse. To abuse. Middle fingers up to abuse. You even holding something sharp and telling your kid, just an example, like, if you don't do this, you don't want to know what's going to happen next. That's an abuse. That's a threat. Like, calling that out, as even in the earliest stage, it's very important. We don't want to middle fingers up to fears, man. Kids already are fearful human beings from the day I think they were born. They're born and these little these little like souls are trying to please their parents up until adulthood, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we as parents see it or not, they are literally internalizing everything you're saying. So yeah, middle finger up to those who are not ready to do the inner child work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll join you. I
yeah,
think that's an excellent one.
yeah,
I'm with you on that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what did we pull from our Tiffin today? We talked about transitions. These are stress points for kids and for adults that we really need to pause. It's okay to say, I'm stressed and I am going to take a
Mhm,
break. That is encouraged, actually. We talked a bit
mhm,
about ADHD. It's a difference, it's not a deficit. We
mhm,
talked about behaviors are messages and communication. And that's coming from our nervous system. It's impacting how we regulate emotionally. We talked about
mhm.
relationships, how to co-regulate, how to regulate, all of that. Self-care, all this is important. So anything that I left out, the biggest one, the most important one that sort of is the be-all end-all overarching theme that connects all of these things is, say your two words, inner child, right?
Which
That's the one.
I was gonna say that's a 3 word, but I guess, yeah, inner child work. Yeah,
what,
it is
what
3 words.
was the 3 words?
No, I thought inner child work. I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
why I thought it was a
you're
3 word.
right. It is 3 words.
Let's do that so we can regain joy and compassion for ourselves. You're not doing that for your child. You're doing that for yourself, and your child will naturally see you be there for them without you even saying or doing anything.
Look, to everyone that joined us today, this is our perspective. These are our experiences. I did, Shuraya, you also have a really good clinical sense too. We provided some strategies, some of ours, some that we've learned. But
Mhm.
this Tiffin, this toolkit, whatever you call it, like, this is yours to curate, yours to decide. The bottom line
Mm-hmm.
is, our hope is that we're all actively paying attention, building awareness,
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand that we play a role in our kids' lives, in our partners' lives, in each other's lives, and how do we take responsibility for that? And so
Mm-hmm.
that includes, like we said, awareness, rest, as you said, compassion. But fill this toolkit, this Tiffin, with what works for you, your family. Just keep working on it. Go in there, edit it, fix it. These are things that I think we're all worthy of. We all deserve to have.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as we say to everyone, and I didn't forget, so I'm good. I feel good that I still have it after the whole summer. But these episodes are, we're building a community. They're just door openers. We're just getting started. So we want you guys to add to them, like send your feedback. We don't care what it is. I don't care if it's heart emojis. Send messages. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. Like every episode is us building stats towards bettering our
Mm-hmm.
community. So some things you don't think work, that's fine. We'll do more of something else. So we need your feedback. We can't survive as Middle Fingers Up without you guys telling us what you need and what we're missing. So please, please, please send that feedback. Try any last words, because we'll let you end the episode.
Be kind. Be kind, and it starts being kind to yourself. There's a lot of pressure. Recognize that there is a lot of pressure, but you're not alone. So be kind, and then you will be able to be kind to others.